can you just try and explain, kind of for somebody who really has no understanding, like what is dopamine and maybe how could it potentially impact us?
100%. So it's really useful with these brain chemicals to understand like why we actually have the chemical and then what the modern world is doing to it. And for context, with our brain chemistry, we have been humans in the same physical form with the same brains for about 300,000 years. And for 99.9% of that 300,000 years, we were running around in a forest, hunting for food and building shelters and making fires. So our brain chemicals are all developed for that experience of life, not this one that we're all in now. And dopamine specifically lived in our brain to make the experience of doing hard, effortful things feel good. So we had to spend 4 hours hunting for some food. That wasn't like all just like pleasure out there in the cold trying to find food, but dopamine was driving us to do these hard things so that we would do them, so that we would survive. And for all of human history, we've chased dopamine. It's been like a massive desire for us because it's kept us alive on this planet. In the last 30 to 50 years, we began inventing ways to access that elevation in dopamine that used to come from tons of effort, but now we can access it instantaneously. Specifically, the phone has become the key source of accessing that dopamine. And the biggest challenge is, because dopamine used to take a while to increase and then it would naturally fall back down, now because it goes up so quickly in such an unnatural way, it crashes. And lots of us are now struggling with feeling depressed or not being able to focus or having low mood. And that is as a result of this dopamine system crashing. That's what happens in our brain when it crashes, and learning how to then naturally rebuild the chemical is really important.
So why does it crash? Why does it fly back up and then has to crash?
Effectively, our brain and body is really good at this thing called homeostasis, which just means balance. And if you've ever watched a medical TV show, for example, and someone's having a heart problem in a hospital, and you look at that heartbeat monitor on the board, you'll notice it's going really fast, really slow, really fast, really slow in an extreme way. The reason the body is doing that in that moment of a heart issue is because the heart is beating really quickly because a problem is taking place, but the heart is trying to slow itself down with every beat in order to try and get itself back to equal. And our body is just extremely good at trying to live at equal. And because when you go on the social media, for example, it goes so high, the brain's only response is, I need to make it go really low so I can get back to equal effectively. And it's it's a limited resource, dopamine. And you can imagine it there are these little bubbles in our brain, and they sit in this little area you can imagine as a dopamine factory. And we only have a limited amount of them. And when you're, say, cleaning your house, doing something that's basic and effortful, you're just using a few of those dopamine balls and you get a little bit of satisfaction. When you go on the social media feed, specifically Instagram Reels and TikTok, you use all those balls up, all these dopamine vesicles transfer in your brain, and then you're left with very few, and then you end up feeling really shit.
So, as many of our listeners know, we are really keen advocates for raising the social media age in this country to 16 and limiting screen time in children. But what could you say as parents, what would be your advice to a parent who has a child who, maybe is doing the things you're saying? So, they're taking their tablet away and they're having these outbursts, these meltdowns, because they're losing that tablet. What advice could you give to a parent? Do they go cold turkey, or, what would you say?
I would say the most important thing is that you're naturally building dopamine on the other side of life with the kids. So you're not doing just this quick form of dopamine, but there's other activities that they're having to do in order to effectively earn time on the screens. I think in general, the idea of less screens is really good, and we can go into how you actually do that. But as a gold standard rule, I think a child should have to require certain steps to have been achieved before they've effectively allowed a screen. So that would be things like cleaning our bedrooms is ridiculously good for your dopamine. A simple example that we can relate to, we all have the really annoying task of changing and washing bedding. It's the most annoying thing in the world, and you have to do all the sheets and wash it all and dry it all and put it all back on. But you get into your freshly washed bed and you're really satisfied. You don't get into your freshly washed bed and think, I really regret the fact I changed and washed my bedding.
No.
You do get the opposite feeling when you scroll for too long. You regret it. I don't think you should ever go on a phone in a bed. I think that's a really good rule to have. That doesn't mean no technology, just no phone. And this is where technology is interesting because it is nuanced. It's not all technology equals bad for our dopamine. If you were sitting in bed, you were like, I'm going out for my earlier night, and you sat in bed with like an iPad and you watched a podcast, or you watched some Netflix, or you watched something that was just slow, like a movie, anything that was long form content, it's really not that bad for your dopamine. Okay. What is bad is when the content is constantly changing, and that's what really, really stimulates the dopamine system.
Okay.
So for me, like, I love consuming content, but I know the quick content is making me feel really shit. And like, I'm someone that just does struggle with mental health. Like, if I don't get these things right, I will just experience loads of like low mood and overthinking and just not feel good. And I hate that state. So for me, I love consuming content. I know the short content screws me up. So therefore, if I sit in bed, like, I would watch a podcast on an iPad, and I would try and stay on one video like for longer than 10 minutes or something like that.
Yeah.
And it is a bit boring at first. It's like you have to sit there and like, oh, it's a little bit boring. But like, your brain can very quickly get through that uncomfortable state and begin to find it enjoyable to watch longer form content. And the same with the kids. Like, if they're going to watch an iPad, it's about trying to pick longer form content over the short form.
BBC iPlayer we've used every like 30-minute episodes. They don't come off there like on rage. Everyone must get bored of it.
That's really interesting.
And that's perfect.
Yeah. So when it was COVID times, I was obviously working, Dean was working. It was really challenging. It was really hard. But what did we do? We gave our youngest the tablet. So she was 1 and 2 when it was COVID.
We were
I remember it was so bad. She used to love Peppa Pig.
Yeah.
We didn't really monitor it, did we? She loved Peppa Pig. What else did she like? Blippy, Cocomelon, everything basically that you're saying.
Cocomelon is like drug dealing.
They are literally. She'll be all right.
but we weren't educated. We didn't know. It was this journey we've only come on kind of in the last few years. So we would give her that short form. And do you know what I started to notice? Those times where we did have minutes and we did think, oh, we'll sit down for a family film, our youngest couldn't watch it.
Yeah.
No.
And our eldest could always watch the film.
Not stimulating enough.
But she literally couldn't watch the film. And actually now, reflecting on that is probably why we couldn't get her to sit still for a film. But then we banned it. When did I do that course? I did an NSPCC course, like, I don't know, about 2 years ago.
A couple of years ago, yeah.
And then we made the move to ban YouTube, made the move to ban stuff, and now, it's still not brilliant, but
we've on Netflix and stuff. I allow Netflix on the phone
BBC
sometimes. BBC iPlayer, but not like YouTube anymore.
No.
But even YouTube,
they watch
long.
drawing. They watch people do drawing in copy. So I allow that. I think
that
that's
sort of thing's right. It's YouTube Shorts specifically that you want to steer away from. But then also, the only caveat on the long form content is things like Cocomelon, because they've created short form content inside long content, basically, because it's like rapidly changing, loads of colors, loads of lights, like really change. So then it's really overstimulating. And like you see videos online of like babies like screaming when Cocomelon gets taken away because their dopamine is crashing so hard. And like these people making these shows, like, it's not an accident. They've got hundreds of neuroscientists like me, like studying babies' brains and getting them hooked. And that's sad, but it's just the truth.
Wow.
And it's just important to consider this idea of how can I get them watching slower stuff. And it might seem like, oh, who cares? Like, it'll be all right. Like, there's at least they're entertained right now. But the thing that's really important to understand is it's the long-term effect that will occur if they continue to do that for years and years, because eventually, say you get like 8, 10, 12 years old, you require an attention span. Like, that's part of being a human being, is being able to like download information from a teacher or from a book or from a video, like being able to learn some information so that you can apply that information, so that you can just make progress as a human being. And if you don't have a good, healthy level of dopamine in your brain, you can't focus. Even as adults, we're really struggling after a few years of getting addicted to these phones. But if you do that from super young, although it's easy now, you're actually creating a difficult challenge in like 10 years' time, basically.